Firstly, thank you, Bev, for joining us and for contributing to our research. Bev's quoted in the research, and you'll see some of her views there. Some of them mildly critical about the function's role in this respect, but don't take it out on her. But I just wanted to start, first question, Bev, around, well, how do we get the function focused on that organisational level of performance rather than the individual level?
So obviously what's critical in HR is that you are there as a function to drive the business objectives and where the objectives and the business is going. Your alignment to that is absolutely key. And then what I've done in my career is really been lucky enough to be on boards. So if you are fortunate enough to be on a board, it's not about only writing the people strategy. It's about helping be an executive business leader, help the business write its strategy. Because if you understand the business strategy, you'll understand what levers HR can pull to drive that. And then once you've got that, John, I think you then work closely with your teams to help the HR teams understand their mission and purpose. So if, for example, you're transforming your business, which I think a lot of you are, into either a more digital business or you're coming out of certain markets, all your activities need to be linked to those changes. There might be some pet projects that people are doing, which they have to give up.
Yeah. I think that's a critical point to start with, that as businesses change, and there's hardly a business in this room, I guess, as you say, that doesn't say it's going through some sort of change. How does performance change? How does the definition of performance change as you move to a new model, if you like? One of the things that Rob brings out in the report, and you'll see Rob in a moment just talking through our research, is the importance of how we flow down objectives. So we have clarity, we hope, at the top of the shop. How do we make sure that flows down and that everybody understands, here's my contribution to those top level goals? And we quote Mark Efron in the report, a sort of specialist in this area, who says that often goes wrong and gets disconnected. What's your experience of that, Bev?
Yeah, so I think you raised the performance appraisal system. So most HR people are very, very excited when they can upgrade their performance appraisal system, particularly when that appraisal system can now be driven by technology. That seems to be the holy grail. Of course, what's inside the system is far more important than the actual technology. And so in organizations that are transforming, what we've seen happen is they might put a top-level objective, for instance, to drive digital sales. Now, it might be software sales, it might be solutions. And at the board, it all makes sense. But in one of the organizations I've worked in, where we had a federated system, you've got 26 markets, 26 sales teams, 26 different business contexts. When you flow down an objective like that, it can sometimes lead to an unintended consequence. So in some markets, they understand how to adjust it to meet the market. But you could have, as in our case, a market where the sales teams were selling product and they were receiving healthy commissions on product. You're now trying to encourage them to divert some of their sales efforts to digital solution selling. We know it's a longer sale, we know it's slightly trickier, and also sometimes the margins are lower, and so there's a different commission structure. What we discovered when we started pulling the data, in other words, seeing what sales were happening in that region, we discovered that the way that commission plan on product had been designed was so rich that there was no ways the behavior of those salespeople was going to change. So everybody was nodding at the regional level, at the country level, but the truth is it goes down to an individual's behavior in an individual environment with a customer. And so we can just say, oh, we've got this whiz-bang appraisal, but really understand, is it driving the intent you want? And I want to use another example, going back a few years. I think some of you will remember that Netflix famously threw out their performance management system, particularly in 2014 when they were moving towards being a streaming organization. And HR people only hear one thing, well, they've got rid of their performance management system, therefore we should do the same. But in fact, what they'd uncovered was that the business they were going into was so different, they didn't have time to redesign it, and also it was working against the culture they were trying to create. So they abandoned it and actually worked at creating a mindset. Mm-hmm. So they then communicated their top values through all the organization and held team leaders responsible for creating great teams and accelerated the communication of the message. And where you had people who had performed well in the old world and in the old performance system would have got excellent, but were not fit for purpose in the new world, they also found a way to have those individuals leave the organization with richer than normal severance benefits. So that's an interesting case study to read as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a couple of lessons. One is, don't just pick up what other people did because it sounded interesting. All about context here, isn't it, and what you're trying to drive. I think the importance of data and bringing data to the table to say, you know, top team, you think you've done this. The data's telling us that people are behaving in another way is important. And I think HR getting out and about and watching that. Does this flow down? Do people down here understand what people up there are saying? And being the eyes and ears of the top team, if you like, or the management team. I think we were talking, Bev, about sometimes the management teams, executive teams, etc., have great ideas, great strategic plans, and then they go one step further, don't they? And they say, and we also know how to do it, and they invent a solution as well at the same time. And there are times when we think, maybe that's not the best solution, and need to intervene. I don't know if you've got any experience of that in your past.
Yes, again, I think it goes back to the quickest way to save money if you're under pressure in an organisation is obviously to cut costs, and one of your biggest costs is probably going to be labour costs. And we quickly run to the restructuring solution. And I've got 3 examples where, in discussion with business leaders, we've managed to persuade the business leaders to think of a different solution. So obviously within the transformation that Rico is undertaking, there were service engineers that were going to become, redundant due to the print decline. But we had vacancies in our new services business, so we reskilled, and that's a well-known case study. I think it's inside this report as well. But there's another example which goes back to CSE and DXE. In DXE, they had a competency centre, a massive SAP competency centre in the DAC region. And we had an outsourced arrangement with a big partner who's in the room today, Manpower, and we negotiated with Manpower. Rather than release that competency centre, they moved across to a company that could resell them. So they stayed intact as an employment team and were able to be resold. And I think somebody anecdotally said to me, they were still there 10 years later. So that company had made money from that proposition, but also those individuals had careers that had continued. There are many, many ways to do this that are not really just straightforward. And being able to go to the board or to your manager and explain the business case for doing something completely different is critical. So understanding the costs and understanding the benefits is at the heart of that influence and persuasion.
So my little takeaway is sometimes it's not just about taking the strategic goals as declared, but sometimes about challenging as well, to say, is there real clarity? Is this the best way of doing it? We think there's a better way that will be more productive for the company. Bev, that's great. I want to just one thing from you as we go through today, and you've thought about it a bit because we've been preparing this, but if you could think about one thing that you'd hope people would take away from today, what would that lesson be?
I think it's the importance of being able to read financial statements and really understand the health of the business. Typically, we want to shy away from some of those hard facts. And if I can encourage you to listen to our speakers today and to go back to your workplace and ask a few more questions about how this business is doing and what are the drivers of profit for this business.
And we will have a chat. We've got Alex over here who's going to take us through some of those harder measures, hard and softer measures, I think, of company performance a bit later. Bev, that's fantastic. That's set our context. Thank you for that. We'll see Bev later on one of our panels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.